So this was the second miracle that we had. That night, I really was praying. Paul was praying. He was distressed. He thought we weren't going to get it. And God told me it was about 4:30 in the morning. You need to go outside. Now here, I'm in Africa. It's as dark can be. And we're in a neighborhood with all the security and dogs barking and everything. And we're at this monastery, and I'm like, oh my, I'm kind of scared. Could we wait, God, till a little after 5 and you'll get light? I mean, because I do know God has humor. And he didn't say yes or no, but he didn't tell me no. So I said, well, I'll just wait a little bit.
Just tell me what you want to do.
Oh, is it ready? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish the story, and then we'll pick up those slides.
Okay.
So at that point, I went outside, and I started praying. And he was telling me everything about how you're going to mentor these people, and you're going to help them, get this thing up and going, and how grand it's going to be. And finally, after about 30 minutes, I'm writing it all down. I said, God, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I need to know about the land. That's really what I'm coming out here to pray for. And he said, open your Bible. And he had me go to a passage, in Jeremiah. And when I opened the passage read, and you shall have this land today, and you will buy it at this amount of money, and there will be 2 deeds. We bought it for the exact amount of money, and there were 2 deeds. It was very, very specific. We went to see Mr. T that day, and he says, he's smiling, and he says, I got something to tell you. I said, no, I have something to tell you. I said, God told me we're going to get this land today. He says, how did you know? I said, I just told you. God told me we're going to get this land. And he was like, oh my. I said, that should be a witness to you what we're doing. You need to think about what we're doing. Maybe you need to come hear us sometimes when we're preaching. And at that point, we were able to get the land and make that happen. So that was his next promise on this. And I kept saying, but even when we get this land, we got to develop it. And like, how is this going to happen? So we're going to start showing you that story, if we can make the clicker work. There you go. This is the original group of people that worked on this. This is Sally and I. This is Silas, and eventually you'll get Paul. He'll come up, and then we'll go to the next slide.
You can look over there if it's easier.
Oh, okay. Look over there. Go you next. It doesn't happen without God. Okay, so this is the monastery place I'm telling you about. You go to the next slide. And this was us finally, after the lots of meetings, being clear we needed to buy the land. Go to the next slide. And this is us deciding that maybe the monastery wasn't the best place while we're looking for the land, so we went to another place called Tabor Hill, which we really liked a lot, but it's a long drive. Next.
Now, was this all around Nairobi?
The monastery was in Nairobi. Our camp that I'll show you is outside of Nairobi, but it's in Nairobi County. It's in Nairobi County. So this is us doing more meetings and praying about what we're going to do, and we still can't get the man to give us the land. We'll go to the next one. But we had a mission, and our mission that we decided when we were doing this is that when we buy this land, not only do we want to place a school on it, but we want eventually to develop something self-sustainable for a ministry. Even if it can pay for all the ministry, it could pay some, and that means they wouldn't be totally dependent on Americans. So that was really important to us. Go to the next slide there. So here you go. Here's Dr. Paul Beecham, because Sarah and Paul, they decided they would go with us. That's a whole nother story about how that trip went. But Paul brought a great gift to our pastors. One of the things that we found out when we were putting the curriculum together was not only did we need to teach them the Bible, but they needed a lot of counseling and life skills. They really had no counseling, like what we call spiritual counseling, Christian counseling, for families, for people with addiction, and addiction's a big problem there. So Paul went and he taught Romans, which they absolutely loved, but he also taught them how to work with people who are addicts. And many of the pastors came up and have subsequently talked about how that has really grown their ministry and brought more people into the ministry. You got the next slide. So there we go. We're celebrating that class. We went back from the place up north because we still didn't have the land yet. And we met back at the monastery. Keep going. And these are some of our pastors, our original pastors. The gentleman up there with the beard, we got really blessed. There's a ministry called Berean Safari, and it's a ministry which puts the Bible into a context of a real life story and what the words really mean and what does it mean in the life of the people. And he was able, because he was working in Africa, to put it in their context. So that was really, really helpful for us. And that was a God gift. We just stumbled on this man. It's amazing how God just kept putting people in our path. We'll go to the next one. Here we come to the land. So this is the land that we ended up buying. You go to the next slide. And because we'd already looked at so many parcels of land and we didn't know at this point if we would get this land, we asked all the pastors to come and pray over it before we made the final decision. And this is them. They did prayer circles all over this land, praying that we would get this land that God eventually made happen for us. You go to the next slide. And there they are. They can pray like nobody's. They've taught me how to pray a lot stronger. Because some people are embarrassed to pray, but I've learned to be bold now. We'll go to the next one. So we start buying this land and we're developing it, and we bought this machine to make clay bricks because that was going to be one of our first ideas for self-sustainability. That worked out great for the camp, but that wasn't really the idea. But what was interesting, I'm going to tell you, we decided to call the camp Chimmy Chimmy because it means living water, and you'll see what that means in a minute, not knowing anything about what's going to happen. Keep going. So one of the biggest parts of the ministry is we feel like everything that we teach has to have application. So most of these pastors, they're pastoring their church, so if they're not there on the weekend, nobody's getting fed. So the way it worked is we would have them come on a Sunday night after church, be with us 1 week, miss 1 weekend of church, and then go home by the following Friday. And when they went home, whatever we were teaching them, they'd have to have an applied lesson. For instance, if Paul had come and taught Romans, then they would go back and do a Bible study with their individual churches and congregations on Romans. Whatever we taught them, they had lessons and they had to prove that they did this so they could move on into the next training. So it ended up we would do four sessions a year, each of those 2-week periods. Very long. They start usually at 4:30 or 5 in the morning with prayer and usually end up about 7 at night. So very, very long days. So at the end, we also prepare them to reach unreached people groups.
Yeah, can I ask a question? How are you communicating with these people? Do you learn their language? Do you have an interpreter? How do you go about doing that?
Okay, there's 43 tribes in Kenya. Most of them will speak Swahili. Okay? If any of them have been to school, they will know the reading of the English language in a few words, but not well. So one of our criteria when we look at the students is we try to look at people that at least have some basic understanding of English, okay, or we tutor them, but we do not take people who have no ability to speak English at all because they wouldn't be able to understand everything. A lot of the lectures may be given in Swahili, but they also have materials that we're giving them to read that are all in English. We've got Bible commentaries that people have given to us to share. So that's one of ours. So another dream, and I'm glad you brought that up, because another dream of ours is to do something with ESOL for people that are leading churches, that maybe this would help them as a first step to come into the school and would be helpful to them.
In a nutshell, like what did you teach in a sentence or two?
Oh, in the curriculum?
Yeah, like that first 15-hour day.
Well, we have it broken up, our curriculum, and it's actually, you can see our curriculum on our website, so I'll give you a link to that. But we have fundamentals of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. So we go through the whole Bible with them and see the continuing story of God. Most of these pastors do not have a full Bible. Many of them didn't have a Bible that wasn't torn or beat up. They had the New Testament. They didn't know any linkage to the Old Testament. No idea of God's promise from the beginning. They came to Jesus through salvation because they believed in a Savior but they had no idea of the whole story. So that to them was like the most marvelous thing, to see God's hand. And then when they saw that, they said, in our native area, God has been telling us through the spirits and everything that there's something more that we needed to know, and now we know it. Which was really, it just made me tingle to hear that they had known the message of creation and salvation, but they didn't really know what the message was at all. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Oh, no, let's stay on this one. So, I just want to give you the idea of the dire circumstances these people go into. So these are huts they went into along the coast, right along Somalia, not a real safe region. These people don't have any beds, so we took one bed to show them how they could make a bed, just a pallet, type bed. No food, no clothes. They live in these huts because the animals roam underneath and they'll eat them if they sleep on the ground. And so it's the Bonai people, and we were trying to take them the message of Jesus. And we went several times to visit them, and Silas and his wife have still continued to minister to this group of people and to bring them to Christ. Okay, next slide. So this is graduation. You can see that's Americanized, but they made it Kenyan with the ladies. Okay, so we had the ladies. Nancy, if you remember Nancy, she was there for that very first one and helped us because she had done a graduation. She knew how to put it together, so she helped them learn how to do the processional and the program and make it very formal. Because for many of these pastors, this is a huge life event. None of them have ever had this level of education, and I think we had 500 family members and friends come to the first graduation for basically 20 pastors. It was amazing. They just came in droves, and it was such a celebration. We go to the next slide. And that was our first class, 2010. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. And then, after we did that 2-year class, to be a sustainable ministry, we had some consultants say, well, y'all have to now go on a road trip, and you have to go interview in their communities the difference that this particular training did for them. So Sally and I and Julia Thompson, we traveled. We can put up all the slides on there. We traveled to 4 different villages, and we went in to the churches. First, we wanted to talk to the pastor's wife, and that was really important because their tribal tradition do not value women very well. It's like the man, the son, the daughter, the animals, the wife. This is how it goes. So we had one pastor's wife who said, I'm going to tell you the impact of this training, because we did marriage counseling and we did God's provision for man and wife. And she said, my husband used to sit in his chair and he would point to the side chair and say, where's my Bible? And she'd run, go get his Bible. She says, now he doesn't do that anymore. He asked me to come sit with him and we read the Bible and we talk about it. She talked about how he was disciplining the family and including her rather than it just being him. And she said what they had done for their marriage was incredible. Several other women in that congregation talked up and said, we never knew God's plan for marriage, and now we know it. I just cried. I mean, I just couldn't even imagine that. I hadn't even thought about that. We went to another village where this man, Joseph, is, and that congregation said, you know what, we're just in this tiny little, metal sheet building, and he's preaching. And all these people from the big church down the street, they're coming and leaning in the windows to listen to what he's teaching, because he's teaching something they've never heard before. So he got a lot of notoriety out of that, and that's how his church began to grow. And he then formed an alliance in his community where all the churches would come together, and he could teach them everything he'd learned in his school. So now we weren't just multiplying our pastors, we multiplied more pastors. So let's go to the next slide. So after that, we started our next class because we got the land, but as I said, building on the land was difficult because it's in what's called dry cotton soil, which maybe some of y'all know what that is. I did not know what it was, but it's really the kind of unstable soil you can't put a building or anything on. So you have to dig out the foundation. It takes a really, really long time. And then you try to get contractors, and I'm not used to bribes, and so it just goes on and on. How long is this going to take? The price just doubled and tripled, and people wouldn't show up, and they hold you hostage. But eventually, after 2-3 years, it was going, and we said, okay, we'll start the school at JJ, which was the monastery, but we're going to finish it at our land. So go to the next slide. So we did that, and the first time we had a class out there, all we had was a little building, that we could cook in, and we had a tent, and we taught under the tent. We said, this will be the beginning. We couldn't build the building that they wanted to quote us on because the price kept going up, and it was extremely unstable. So we took a safari, and when we were on this safari, they had these safari tents, and I'm like, well, Paul was a tent maker, maybe we can do it with tents. So that came back, and we prayed about that, and it was a whole lot cheaper than building the building. That's how we ended up starting out with safari tents for the pastors to be in, and also for visitors and mission teams to come and experience that, because people here would know what that was. Over there, they didn't really understand it, and I'll get to that story in a minute. Then God introduced us to Remco and Jennifer Bromette, and they went on a mission trip with us, and they shared with me their ministry, True Identity, which teaches both men and women who they are with God and who they are with Jesus. And I thought, what a wonderful ministry to bring to Africa. We brought that ministry, and we brought it first to women. Women cried, they weep. They never knew how Jesus loved them as a princess, as his divine princess, and how blessed they were, because they had always been under this male domination, and they just couldn't believe they were seen that way. It did remarkable work. It also helped us in counseling people that were in depression, and for women that couldn't have children, not just to give up all hope. And I'll come back to that idea in a minute. Keep going. And this is us starting to build the tents, as you can see, pretty raw land, and we had a dining tent. That was always fun when it rained real hard. We'll go to the next one. This is our kitchen. We have a 10-sheet building for the kitchen. We'll go to the next slide. We have our gate. That's our name on the thing, Chimmy Chimmy. There's the dining hall. You can see it's pretty open. And because of my interest in healthcare, and because of their interest still in that, they said, Beth, if we, in Kenya and in a lot of Africa, community is everything. It's a little different than what we see. It's like, if you're blessed with something, then what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to share it with all of your community around you, and then they'll know. And we thought, well, if we're followers of Jesus, we've got to share our resources with our community. So they wanted a health fair. So we organized several health fairs. They got quite big. I think the last one we probably saw 1,200 people. I mean, it was huge. We had people getting diagnosed with all kind of things because we hooked up with one of the hospitals that one of our board members was on. So that was our health clinic, and what we did while the health clinic went on, we entertained the children with different sports and events and things that they could do. So that was us going. We took a team of youth from RUMC to do that, and I have to report good news that several of those youth have gone on into ministry and missions. I mean, just really, you'll know some of the names. They've gone on, and it pleases me.
So what do you do at a health clinic?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, go back to that. We have tents, okay? Everything's a tent over there. And in one tent, we have somebody who does what's called low birth weight for children. They weigh the children, and they put them on a scale, and then they give them nutritional formula for what they need to do with the meal and the vitamins. We had another clinic where we had the hospital bring somebody who could do eyeglasses, the local hospital. We had another tent that was doing people that needed to have their feet looked at, like podiatry, like we would know podiatry. We had the cancer doctors come from the hospital and do some breast screening. And at that time, they weren't talking about a lot of diseases over in Kenya, so we had some doctors come and talk about heart disease and diabetes, which are really rapidly on the rise in Kenya because their diet is mostly fat and starch. So we had them come in, and that was eye-opening for people to understand. you can get your sugar tested. Here's some symptoms. If you have this, see about it. And we had several in our class that ended up getting diagnosed with diabetes, and many in the community. We'll go with the next slide. So this is us going out. We had an alumni outreach. So after we graduated, we still had a commitment that we would bring our alumni together and do education with them. So we went around and did that. Go to the next one. And after that first time of going around, in 2012, we asked Mike Long to come and do the graduation because he'd been very supportive of all of our efforts. He even let me drive a truck up on the front of the church, you know, because we were trying to get a vehicle at that time. But Mike came, and not only did he do a graduation, but 2 days before the graduation, he had the alumni come and he did updates on their ministry. What were their challenges? How can I help you? You know, just counseling and advice, and they just loved that. And he and Terry went there, and they also dedicated a building that we have as our classroom. We were there, that RUMC did. Go to the next slide. And those are those graduates. After that, go to the next one.
Some of these are women, right? That are
Yeah, oh yes, I'm glad you brought that up. The very first class was mostly men, okay? Mostly men, it was not women. But the few women, I think we had 2 or 3 in that first class, they kind of, wait a minute now, you're teaching all this stuff, why don't we have more women in here? And so they really, you will start to see much more women in these pictures as we go along. And these women have actually done some amazing things. I'm going to tell you about a couple of stories about them. So that was eye-opening. Not only did we have probably, I would say out of the 43 tribes, we always try to pick from the tribes, we also tried to pick a mix of men and women too. So we have a diverse group. And these women would go out and start these Bible studies and these discipleship groups. So I'm glad you asked that. Go back there for a second. That last slide on the women. Yeah, there you go. So Grace, I want to talk about Grace there. Grace was a very strong woman, and her story was interesting. In Africa, they don't really believe in divorce. They believe in wife beating, you know, discipline your wife. You never leave your husband, no matter what he does, even if he brings home AIDS. You know, this is just how it was. And Grace was a product of that, but she prayed and prayed and prayed, and her husband did everything but kill her. And she left him. So she was shunned by her village. And her daughter was kicked out from the father too. But Grace said, I'm going to do a ministry for women. And so what she and her daughter did is they started a ministry for women that were used for sex trade. And they were able to extricate them, bring them back, get them out of addiction, because most of them were heavily drugged, and minister to them and get them employed. So that was a wonderful gift that Grace had, being able to do that. These are all winners. Mike decided that he wanted each year have a Mike Long Follow the Call award. And they would award recipients out of the class that they felt were truly exemplary, like Grace, doing something very significant. And we have in the foundation money that goes to each graduation class for these awards. So his legacy in our churches would continue. And it's a really big honor for them to get an award like this. So these were the first ones.
And you mentioned the foundation. Our foundation
Yes.
has a foundation for Divine Providence.
Our church, we have 2 things. We have the Methodist Foundation, which has the Mike Long money, the $1,800 we get every 2 years for the Follow the Call. Here we have a fund that we put some money in. Individuals put some money in the beginning, and it funds a scholarship for one of the students each term that we have, each year. It gives their scholarship. So that's what we have, these 2 things. We'll go to the next one. So this was the classroom that Mike dedicated. We'll go to the next one. And this was exciting because we were in a tent. The dining tent was where we were teaching prior to this. So to have this thing and they could stay up late at night and there were lights on was wonderful. We'll go to the next slide. So in 2014, this is our class. This time we decided we would go into a northern desert area, which we did for a few years, and I'll show you more pictures, where everybody there is camel herders. So they're not in any one place. They move across the northern desert between Kenya and Ethiopia, very, very harsh conditions, had not heard Jesus and really welcomed us. In this particular class, one of the pastors, he and his wife, they were teachers. They felt called from God to leave there where they lived comfortably in their church and relocate to this region. And basically they were able to develop a school up there where they're educating and a church. And that came from that particular class. This is another, we took an RUMC group over there, and the kids from the youth group did a sports day with the kids, and it was just fun. And we had the families and everything, because a lot of times the women never get out of the house, they never get to have any fun. So we saw them jump roping and playing volleyball, and one lady said, "This is the most fun I've had in I don't know how long." It was really, really sweet. We then had Remco Bromet gave us a gift, and we were able to get them electronic tablets where they could have Bible commentaries and a lot of different books on the Bible. So this is them getting that at graduation. They were so excited. Okay, we'll do the next slide. And that's just, we then had the men's retreat for True Identity, because for the first time after the women said they were left out, the men said, well, we're left out, we need our own True Identity retreat. So they got one. They call them the Lions. We got a little bit more money in our fundraising, so we were able to start kind of landscaping our land. So those are just pictures of that. There we are, doing that. We would take mission teams over and help with that. This is their graduation that they had. You can see we're growing in number. See, there's a woman on there too. There's good. Now this woman, Catherine, has a unique story. Catherine had a story that was really near and dear to my heart. She was one of the first women Maasai pastors. Maasai were one of the later reached tribes, okay? And she felt, and most of all of the ministers were men, you know? So her husband was very bold. He was in the class before her, and he said, "Catherine, you need to go." And she said, "No, women don't do this, particularly not in our tribe." He said, "No, I want you to go." So she went to the school, and when she got done, she had a calling to help people that were disabled. Now, we think about people that have physical challenges and mental challenges, and we think about all the support we have here. Over there, if somebody's mentally or physically disabled, they're put in a shopping cart and chained in the backyard when the family has to leave, or they're locked in the house. Then the wife has to also mostly stay in the home and tend to them. So she's kind of shunned as well as the person, because they feel that they were spirit possessed. So Catherine says, we're going to change this. We're going to change this in our tribe. We're going to get resources. We're going to get help. And she was able to do that. Additionally, she was able to start a church because God called her, and she said, well, I have no money. And we encouraged her, well, we didn't have any ability. You can do this. And she started a church under a tree. A man heard about all the good work she was doing, donated her land. They built a church, and she has a very large congregation now of people ministering in that particular tribe. Okay, we continued on. Now we're going to build a garden so that we can have fresh fruits and vegetables, and we're developing the land. This is our water tower that I'll talk about in just a little bit, but we started building the water tower. We had a well. Someone donated money for the well, and the water was not pure though. But they would just boil it and drink it anyway. So we got some money for purification, and I'll tell you that story. We developed a patio because we said, oh, you have such a lovely area. This would be great for, gatherings for the pastors, so we did that. And then here we are getting to graduation here with the class of 2016, so we'll move along with this class. You see how much larger they're starting to get. They went from like 12 now to 24, much larger group. Mike came and spoke at this one. Justice, who's a local pastor and a very learned man, he's got his doctorate in divinity. He also is part of our staff. The way our school works is we don't have anybody full-time except for Paul, and then we bring in teachers, that we've vetted, and Sally's one of the teachers as well. I've gone over and taught on hospice and end of life and dementia, just a variety of topics that they bring in for the school. And again, we have more awardees here, as you see, and Now we're developing the lower part of our land. We're getting animals so that we would have, food like with chickens and a cow, and we'd have milk. So we started developing that. There's our greenhouse. Move on along. And then we had a refresh. We had somebody donate money to refresh our tents, so we were able to get new covers, because it's very dusty there, particularly in the beginning. It was extremely dusty until we got more landscape up. All it was just, we're on a ridge, and the wind will just run across the ridge, and the ridge is about 6,500 feet up, so it's pretty high. Then for the first time, this was something that really blessed my heart. I had wanted to do children's ministry, and Becky Bray went over us a couple of times and taught at some of the orphanages and some of the churches, but we didn't have anything dedicated. So Laurie McDonald was able to take children's ministry over there and introduce that to the pastors. Now here comes the third miracle. So Paul kept telling me the whole time, if we're going to do a self-sustainable ministry, he thought that it would be water, maybe even more than the tents. And I'm like, well, I can help you with the tent side. I don't know anything about water or water purification. He said, well, there's this man named Robert Saunders, and you just need to find him in Atlanta. I said, Paul, do you know how many Robert Sanders there are in Atlanta? I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin. He said, I'll know, you'll get it. So, this goes on for 2 years. He's still asking me, and I'm looking at how many there are. Lord of mercy.
Wow.
Can y'all still hear me if I talk loud? Yeah. So I'm still looking for this Robert Saunders. Wow. This gentleman here.
Life is good.
Yeah, that is always the devil. He always gets into technology, So lo and behold, I was in a meeting with Nancy Lane, and she was talking about this pastor who was over in Austell. Her name was Saunders. And I don't know why I thought about it, but I said, is she married to a guy named Robert Saunders? And she said, oh yeah. I said, is he an water engineer? She said, oh yeah. I said, you do not mean that. So I started calling this man. I'm calling him, and he doesn't know me from Adam, so he doesn't pick up the phone. But every 2 days I call him regularly, and that's not like me. I'm not a pushy person. But I'm telling you, finally he answers the phone, and I explain what we're wanting, and he comes to a meeting here with me and Sally and different people, and he sees the vision of what we're wanting to do. And he says, I'll think about it. I'm going over there to help another church with a water plant. I'll think about it when I go there. So he goes. We don't hear from him. I'm texting him. I'm WhatsApping him in Africa. And literally, I get him on the night before his last day. And I said, Robert, you told me you would go by there and maybe look at it. He said, well, I said I might. I said, well, I think you need to. And he said, you are the most persistent woman I've ever seen. I said, I'm not persistent. God is. You need to go by there. He went by there, and God turned his heart, and that's when he decided that he would get involved with us. And he built an entire water plant. He totally assembled it here. We raised the money for it. And then he disassembled it, and we took it over in 36 suitcases on our next trip and reassembled it. And these are the pictures. I want you to see. This is the thing. It was not little. It's in a whole concrete building. Wow. And it would just distill water like perfectly, like you would get off of a special filtration that you might add to your house at that level. Very, very high grade. So he did that for us. So we were very blessed to get going with water. The interesting thing at that point, remember I told you about the name for the camp? The name for the camp means living water. That was assigned to us, that what God wanted us to do was to have this water business to help the ministry. So the next alumni conference, we had Tom go over and work with the alumni, and he enjoyed that. The pastors enjoyed that. We'll go to the next one. And we graduated that class. You see, we're getting fancier now. We actually have a building with a patio that we can do it rather than under a tent. Okay? And then here are those award winners. And we'll go to the next slide. Now look at this. You saw what it looked like to begin with. This is what had happened over a period of about, so we started in 2012, and now we're at 2016, 2017, and this is how it's grown up.
How big is the land?
We have 5 acres, 5 acres of land. That land has appreciated. It's worth about 8 to 10 times what we paid for it now. We can go to the next one. So you can all see it's very, very green now. We don't have all that dust and stuff that we had before. This is students enjoying themselves.
Is that the chicken dance?
Yeah, the chicken. You recognize it. Yeah, they are doing it. We taught them that dance. We go to the next one. And here's the beginning of the water business. You know, and the water business, you know, has its own story. So after we did the water purification plant, then we said, well, we need to bottle and distill it. Okay? So we started planning that in 2019. And Robert, we raised enough money for Robert to go to China to look at how they could create a bottling plant for us, because that was the cheapest bid he could get. American, the price was going to be twice as much. So Robert went over there, he found a dealer, and then we had COVID. So that made it really difficult. But this is another providence of God, because tell me how much time I have left, I can speed up.
10 minutes.
Okay, I can do this. Okay, so at that point, what happened was that because it was COVID and he couldn't go and inspect, we just had to trust it was going to be okay. So it did come over totally on freighters, but Robert couldn't go. So this was a test that we put the Kenyans to. Y'all will have to put this together without any help. You know, trying to get you a little bit more involved, and they were able to put the plant together perfectly to begin to bottle water. So we'll go to the next slide. This is 2023. We couldn't graduate that class of 2020 because of COVID, because there what happened in Kenya is if you got COVID, not only did you have to stay in your house, but they would come and get you from your house and take you to an extraction center till they determined that you could go back. So that made it really, really difficult. We had to raise several funds just to send some medical supplies over there, some masks, some gloves, some basic things. Good thing we had the water, we could provide them with the water, but it was really, really difficult. The economy suffered, they had a drought, very, very difficult time, but God still provided. So this class did graduate in 2023. We'll go to the next slide. Then we were able to build an ablution block. I didn't know what that was either. It's bathrooms. We needed more bathrooms, okay, because when you'd have these large events, the only bathrooms were the ones in the tents, you know, and so you got 500, 700, you know, people. That's hard to get them in the tent. So we built the bathroom block, and then we put a little gift shop and library in the front. Somebody gave some money for that. The road got really bad. It rains really bad there, and so somebody donated some money for us to resurface the road, and I took a team of youth from over there. We had them with pickaxes, and Jason and them resurfacing the road. We go to the next slide. We have lots of cute slides on that. I played working on the chain gang for them while they were out there. This is a little bit about the way we're set up, so you can see Paula's executive director. You can just click through all the slides to get to it. There you go. And this again is, you know, how we're divided. We have the school with the pastor training. We've now graduated 7 classes, 196 students. We have our sustainability project, which is the water bottling business and the camp. And then we have community outreach, where we do the health clinics and we do the community days. So, as I said, go back to that slide. This is very big for you to understand. Over there, they can reach people far greater than we can, because they don't have any impediment to talking about the gospel. They're not afraid, they're bold, they go out, they preach. And we had them do estimates of how many people they'd reach with the message, and it's phenomenal. Phenomenal growth, you know, that we have. And over 250 churches and ministries. We have ministries in hospitals that minister to people that are sick and dying. That's a whole other story I could come back and talk about. We have ministries in the prison. We have ministries way up in the unreached areas, you know, where they've developed schools. We have ministries in along the Maasai tribe. So just a tremendous growth of ministries and the types of ministry. We even have one that goes along the Somali border, and when they have raiders come in and devastate a town and kill and murder and burn the villages, they will go in and do the reconciliation counseling after that. Okay. All these green dots, this is just Kenya, but all those green dots represent where they're all over Kenya, that cover the country. Okay, next slide. And here we are at the latest graduation that just happened this beginning of December. This is our website. It's called Friends of Divine Providence. So if anybody wants to learn more about what we do and how you can donate or how you can get involved, I'm going to take a team over there in June. It's going to be a family trip. I'm taking my granddaughter who wants to go into nursing there. So if you got any granddaughters or great-grandchildren or any families that want to go, let me know. It'll be being published in the church news. But we are so blessed by God, what He's led two people who didn't know what they were doing and led a lot of Kenyans to not knowing what they were doing to be able to preach the Word of God. So thank y'all for letting me come today.
Thank you.
With the water bottling business, are they able to maybe generate a profit now from the water bottling?
They were generating a fairly good profit, and then the government and their wonderful abilities, because they don't give. They decided to tax the water business. We made a 25% profit. They taxed it 20%, so now we get 5%. So that's when we decided that we'll still bottle less, but we'll do more kiosk. Well, we're not taxed on that, so we have 3 kiosks, and we're selling it that way. And we're also looking into, can we just sell our water? We have a vast amount of water that we can purify because of the gift that we had from Robert. And so we're looking at it, other ways to get around the government.
Where does the unfiltered water come from? Do they have wells?
Yeah, we have a really deep well. It's about 181 meters deep, you know, right through stone, and we've had it assessed twice. It's got a very large reservoir, so we're very blessed with that.
That's a deep well.
It's a very deep well, but it's going through, we're up on a ridge. It's going through mountain rock.
Gee.
Yeah, but it's got a huge capacity, so we're blessed with that.
Hey, Beth, just on behalf of CUC, I wanted to thank you so much for your leadership for this project and the love that it demonstrates for all of humankind. So thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you. It's been a blessing to me from God. I've never been blessed so much as doing this particular project. It's really taught me a lot about the world and people, but mostly about Jesus and miracles and just listening to God.
Gee.
And trusting.
And trusting. Yeah, this was a big trust issue. It's like I'd lay awake and I'm like, I don't even know what to think. You know? Well, thank y'all.